I think of my mum. I think of my mum having to shuffle backwards up the stairs, right? Because her hip had given out on her and she couldn't do it. So she'd shuffle backwards on her backside up the stairs. And that is what 7.6 million people on a waiting list looks like. You've got to love a scapegoat, lads. Come on. Everybody loves a scapegoat. Sounds like a rubbish Chaz and Dave song, doesn't it? Everybody loves a scapegoat. I don't know who the next scapegoat will be. And I don't know who you scapegoat for the fact that the waiting lists have gone up even further. And I don't know what the numbers mean. I don't know what the numbers mean. The numbers are now so ridiculously high. My mum got a new hip. She doesn't mind me telling you, I've checked. My mum got a new hip about 10 years ago. And it was it was more than 10 years ago, actually. I think it was about 15 years ago. I'll get a text off her in a minute. And it was such a smooth operation. Little tribute to Sade there for older listeners. It was such a smooth operation, the whole shebang from beginning to end. I mean, she was in pretty dire straits by the time she got into hospital, but it was done relatively quickly from the moment when she acknowledged that she needed it. Because, surgery is not something you should rush into headlong, but it was a pretty straightforward business from the moment that she agreed that she needed the surgery. And I don't think she'd get one now. I mean, she's well into her 80s. The idea of joining another waiting list now, and she could do with a new knee, to be honest with you, but I think that generation soldier on, don't they? And I don't know what that means in the context of 7.6 million people. Are some of these people waiting to have their tonsils removed? Is that still a thing? Do people still have tonsillectomies and then a lovely bowl of ice cream immediately afterwards? I was so hungry at boarding school that I once considered faking tonsillitis just to get the ice cream that I'd heard they gave you in hospital after you'd had your tonsils removed. I lived in a state of constant hunger at boarding school. I think they thought it was character forming. And you always tried to sit next to the bloke at breakfast who would eat all the rancid boiled eggs that passed for our breakfast. But I never did. I didn't fake tonsillitis in order to get the ice cream, but I considered it. So what does it mean? 7.6 million. And listen to this. 383,083 cases where the patient has been waiting more than 52 weeks. 97,275 cases where they have been waiting more than 65 weeks. 7,177 cases where they have been waiting more than 78 weeks. And in 314 cases, patients have been waiting for more than 2 calendar years. No one ever talks about a calendar year, do they? Is it a calendar month? Anyway, 2 years, 104 weeks in old money. And of course, because they are so fundamentally disingenuous and dishonest now, because post-Boris Johnson, post-Brexit, post-Farage, whatever you want to blame, and my new book, How They Broke Britain, blames all of those things. Whatever you want to blame, whoever you want to blame, the lie is now the point. The lie is now the policy. Lying about 4-star hotels, as we have established this week. Lying about the European Convention on Human Rights, which is what they're reduced to today. Lying about the reasons for the NHS being in such dire straits. Rishi Sunak tries to blame it on the striking doctors. I think he got bearded, didn't he? Actually, can you talk about someone being bearded if they have the appearance of a fellow who wouldn't be able to grow a beard? I'm not sure. But anyway, he got bearded by a junior doctor on Nick's programme, and he came in to take some calls last week or the week before, and trying to blame. So one of the main reasons that doctors give you for striking is the recruitment and retention crisis. Do you remember when we started taking calls, and it was quite surprising because we were expecting the financial considerations to be pretty much exclusively the reasons for striking. And fair enough, because in real terms, they have had their income decimated by 13 years of Tory rule. So absolutely decimated. And the poorer the terms and conditions, or the more the terms and conditions deteriorate, the more a workforce both loses morale and looks around for something else to do. The idea that recruitment and retention is absolutely emblematic of a doctor's vocation. And they tell us again and again and again, yes, we need more pay. We are striking for more pay. But not just so that we get an income that's more commensurate with our training and status. It's so that we attract more people to the profession and stop the people who are leaving from leaving. This is like, night follows day logic, which apparently eludes Rishi Sunak and his mates. You give doctors a better pay deal and they stop leaving the bloody country on the scale that they are currently leaving it. Or they stop mixing and matching with private sector work, which can be much better paid. I don't have the numbers of how many now do a little bit of both, but anecdotally, from what you tell me, when you reach the position where you can make that choice, you'd be almost stupid not to, whether it's deliberate political policy or just a consequence of slow decline. I don't know. I lean towards a bit of both, generally, on those sort of questions. But those two R's, the two R's, recruitment and retention, absolutely intrinsic to industrial action being taken by doctors and nurses. Intrinsic. We need to make the job more attractive, to get people in and to stop people leaving. Especially all those quasi-racists and crypto-fascists who pretended that they wanted to look after us. We've got to train our own. I hated that. I didn't hate that rhetoric enough at the time. I was too distracted by other elements, the more obviously racist behaviour and things like Farage's Nazi poster. That line there, we've got to train our own. You're a doctor. You're looking after my kid in a British hospital and you happen to have been born in France or Nigeria. You're turning on the radio and someone's saying we've got to train our own. They're essentially saying you should F off back to France, aren't they? To doctors and to nurses. And you see, once they've said it to doctors and nurses, they can say it to refugees with their eyes shut. We've got to train our own. Now, how's that working out for you, lads? How's that working out for you with 7.6 million people now waiting to get an operation on the NHS? 7.6 million people waiting to start routine hospital treatment. What happened to training our own? You've had 7 years to do it now since you got your stupid referendum over the line. Where are they all? I'll tell you where they are. They're leaving at a rate of knots. They're all going to Australia. They're getting better paid in other countries. If you hadn't abolished their freedom of movement, they'd probably be working in a bunch of European hospitals as well. And of course, they can work in European hospitals because they also lied to you about what controls of population, what controls a government could bring in on foreign workers or European workers. So what does it mean? What does 7.6 million mean? What does it mean to you? Can we try, in our own clumsy, humble way this morning, to just put some faces on these figures? I think of my mum. Having to shuffle backwards up the stairs, right? Because her hip had given out on her and she couldn't do it. So she'd shuffle backwards on her backside up the stairs. And that is what 7.6 million people on a waiting list looks like. That is someone who can't leave their house because they're in too much pain. It will be trivial stuff or relatively trivial stuff as well. But my goodness me, you need to put some faces on these figures. And don't hold back from telling me what you think about Rishi, if you are a doctor, what you think about Rishi Sunak's attempts to blame you. After 13 years of Tory rule, in 2010, patient satisfaction with the NHS was the highest in history. That, remember, smack in the middle of a global financial crisis that they, the liars, tried to blame on Gordon Brown. All of this stuff is linked. If you get out of bed on the right side in the morning, it's all linked. Highest patient satisfaction in the history of the NHS in 2010. Fast forward 13 years of Tory rule, 7.6 million people waiting for routine hospital treatment. Faces on the figures, please. What does that mean? And for doctors and for nurses, we probably didn't give you enough space to tell us what you thought about Rishi Sunak trying to blame these figures on you. It's another one of his key pledges, of course, to cut waiting lists before the next election. And he did last month claim that strikes had made it more challenging to bring down waiting list numbers, which, is so stupid. You send doctors back to work happy. You create a health service into which more and more people want to move and work. And waiting lists start shrinking immediately. But he's not interested in patients. He's not interested in you. He's only interested in headlines. and posturing and ludicrous, empty rhetoric. And when he's not scapegoating refugees, he's scapegoating doctors. And if they'll scapegoat doctors, they'll scapegoat anybody.